Beijing kicks off the opening ceremony of the Winter Games on this Friday with some 2,900 athletes from 91 countries participating in the two-week sporting event. For more, I have David Cox live on the line. David, it's good to have you on.
Hi, Sunny. Hello from Zhangjiakou.
Right. So, David, you flew into China from the UK to cover the Games, of course. Do tell us a bit about the entry protocols in place for the foreign press.
Well, it's very strict. So you have to have 2 negative tests to be able to get into the country in the few days before getting in, and you also have to be fully vaccinated. So it was quite strict protocols, but everyone was quite used to that from Tokyo 2020 back in the summer, and it was slightly less strict than Japan in some ways.
Right, I see. And David, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there have been at least 287 COVID-19 cases related to the Winter Games since January 23rd, amid the arrival of athletes and related personnel from abroad. What more can you tell us about the COVID-19 situation there related to the latest global sporting event?
So China has been doing its very best to try and keep a cap on the COVID-19 cases. There's like a closed-loop bubble. So basically athletes, press, all officials coming to Beijing haven't been able to have any contact with anyone outside of the Olympics. But even so, despite all the measures, we've still again seen a bit of a rise in COVID cases, and it has affected some sports. So for example, here at the venue where I am, like with the cross-country skiing, Norway are one of the favourites, but some of their main skiers are not going to be here because they've tested positive in the last couple of weeks. So, well, despite all the organisers are doing, it's still been a little bit of a problem here.
Right, I see. And also, David, as part of efforts, of course, to keep COVID-19 at bay during the Winter Games, like you mentioned earlier as well, I understand strict restrictions are in place. Could you tell us a bit more about those restrictions?
It is very strict. So in Japan, back in the summer, it was the case where for the first 14 days, there was a bubble and there were very strict restrictions on where you could go. But in Beijing, basically there's no interaction. In terms of the transport, it's basically you're in your hotel and you go to the venues and back again, and you're not allowed anywhere outside of that. But in some ways, I think just from my perspective as a journalist, it's a little bit more straightforward here than in Tokyo. So it's very clear where you can and can't go. So there's not really any opportunity to break the bubble.
David, what happens if you test positive while you're there and covering the Games? Are you required then to isolate and then straight away go back to your country, or?
Basically isolate, I think, for a minimum of 14 days. And then, so for example, if I tested positive tomorrow, I would have to stay here. And then, yeah, that would pretty much be like the end of the Olympics. The main problem, I think, for a lot of the athletes is not only testing positive, but being a close contact of someone who's tested positive. So in that case, you can still train and you can still compete, but outside of the training venues, you have to be in complete isolation. And there's quite a few athletes who are in that situation at the moment, which I think is causing problems for some.
Right. David, the US FBI has reportedly advised its athletes to leave their personal cell phones, that is, at home, and to use burner phones while in Beijing, given the possibility of cyber intrusions. Have there been similar warnings for British athletes?
There have been similar warnings for Team GB as well. Everyone going, like journalists, athletes, received that warning. A lot of it has been connected with, there's a particular app which everyone has to have on their phone and declare their health status every day. And some cyber experts have said there is a bit of a worry of hacking through that app. China have denied this and continued to deny that is the case, but I think there is an element of concern. So I think most of the athletes from the major countries all have burner phones.
Right, and moving back to the Games, and David, tell us a bit about what you're planning to cover there, what you've covered so far.
So far, I've basically just been covering the build-up, interviewing various athletes, both in Beijing and up here in the mountains. But from tomorrow, I'm going to be covering a mixture of cross-country skiing, biathlon, ski jumping, all the main mountain events, basically.
Right. David, the opening ceremony starts in the evening over in Beijing. What are some of the things that you believe would be worth keeping an eye on?
I mean, I think it's going to be absolutely spectacular. I remember watching Beijing 2008, and it was an extravaganza like we haven't quite seen before. So I'm sure it's going to be something similar. I think scaled back just like a little bit. It's not going to be as long as it was before, but I'm very much looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it in person. It's a long way from the mountains down to central Beijing, but I'll be watching on television from up here.
Right, and so will we, David, so will we. All right, then, as always, David, thank you for the latest, this time over from Beijing.
Thank you.